right now is under attack. The recent hack into the government's most secure infrastructure is being called a digital Pearl Harbor, and it may have been going on for years. The Treasury Department, Nuclear Security Administration, the Energy Department, and many defense contractors and plenty of other agencies are all believed to have been compromised.
The closest analogy that I can draw here is this is like a proof of concept attack for the Japanese on Pearl Harbor on December the 7th. It's like they flew several hundred airplanes over Pearl Harbor, didn't actually attack anything, just took a look at the ships at their docking positions and then went back to their aircraft carriers. What else do you have to know at this point to know that the Russians can get into all these different systems, and if they can, so can others?
So can others, he says. And if you think this attack is over or has been stopped, think again. There is widespread belief among cybersecurity experts that foreign actors, mainly Russia, are still inside the nation's most important systems, and at worst, actually control some of them. So even if they haven't crashed the systems, they now know their way around. And who knows what has been stolen from them. Unlike our military, which is still the most powerful on earth, when it comes to cybersecurity, we are still way behind.
This is bad for national security. It is bad for the cybersecurity discipline, the professionals, the craft. We know the Russians are relentless pursuers. They are not casual. They're quite sophisticated. This is a big one.
Yeah, a really big one. Many in the industry believe the United States government does not have the people in place or even the knowledge to counter this attack, after we have only just now realized it's been going on for months and possibly years. There are reasons why we believe Russia is behind the largest and possibly most devastating cyber attack in world history, an attack the U.S. government now calls a grave threat. In 2015, Russia launched a similar attack on the Ukraine. It unleashed the, quote, black energy malware and took out power to 700,000 homes in that country. A practice run, possibly, for a large-scale attack like that one here in the United States. Unlike many other countries, Americans have become spoiled. We rely so heavily on electricity, we cannot function without it. When the power goes out in this country, you know what happens. Chaos ensues, looting, fires, riots. Americans turn on each other. The worst case scenario now is that Russia has access to America's user manual, one that spells out exactly how to take down the nation's energy grid. The founder of the World Economic Forum warned of the consequences of a major cyber attack like this earlier this year. Listen.
But still, pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services.
All of it is really very frightening. So I believe this is an act of war. And when America is attacked, our attackers must pay the price. We must unleash U.S. Cyber Command to hit back, punish those responsible in a way that they are taught a lesson not to mess with the United States ever again.
You just watched Newsmax TV.
Governors and liberal secretaries of state, you can see that they have broken the law and gone against our Constitution with this election. And so, because of that, on January 6th, as the people of Western North Carolina sent me to Washington to do a job, I will be contesting the election.
All right, welcome back. That was Congressman-elect Madison Cawthorn of North Carolina. That's earlier today at the Turning Point USA Youth Summit in South Florida. He says he'll join a growing number of representatives who will challenge the results of the election come January 6th. And Madison Cawthorn joins us. Great to talk with you. Congratulations on the election, first off. And this is a big, quite a bold first move you're going to make here. Tell us why you're doing it.
Well, the number one reason, I was pontificating in that talk today at SAS, the Student Action Summit, And I really started saying, the reason it's more fun to be a Republican is that, you can go to bed at night knowing that you are doing the right and the just thing. And so as I was sitting there, I know this will cause some political blowback. In the end, I don't believe anyone should be sent to Washington, D.C. for a career. I believe they should be sent there to do a job for the American people and to represent them. And right now, according to Article 1 of the Constitution, we see that in our state, the election process is only allowed to be altered or changed by the state legislature. But what we're seeing going on in 7 of these very key swing states is that, as you just played in that clip, we have these rogue Democratic governors and secretaries of state who were altering the laws because of a pandemic and the emergency. But as I always say, if you let your elected leaders break the law during an emergency, they will in the future create an emergency to break the law. And so I absolutely believe it is imperative that we do not allow them to set a precedent that they can come in and change election laws, which then alter the absolute direction and future of our country.
Yeah.
And so I'm here representing the people of Western North Carolina who want me to fight.
There's a lot of people legally that analyze this, and they say the idea of changing the rules at the last minute, allowing them to send out all these ballots and change the way we've always voted, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But there's also, it seems like there's not a lot of appetite to do anything about it because I think the fear of the blowback. You think that's true?
Oh, I absolutely think it's true. I doubt you're ignorant of this. The majority of the people in the Republican Party are spineless and they're cowards. I think that there is a new wave of conservatives that are coming up who are going to stand up and fight. And as it says in Article 2 of the Constitution, it was within our jurisdiction, within Congress, to not say that this election was exactly how it should have been. And I will not be giving my consent for us to accept these electoral votes. And because of that, I think that we need more Republicans to do this. This shouldn't be a hard decision to make. It's very clear based on constitutional law, and it's very clear based on the wishes of the people, and that's who we're here to represent.
Yeah, it's refreshing to hear you talk. You haven't been, swampified yet, I guess. Haven't been in D.C. long enough to fall in with the crowd. Like you said, I want to ask you about this bill that they're about to pass. And by the way, we do have an eye on what's happening on Capitol Hill as far as this vote is going. It just passed the House, passed it handily. We all know nobody read this bill. It's 5,500 pages long, and people just got access to it today. What do you think of the idea of passing these kinds of bills that nobody has read?
Oh, it's absolutely ridiculous. I absolutely think that we should pass a new law which says, in my mind, this is just off the top of my head, but it should be one subject, one bill. And the headline and the subject of the bill should be the only thing you're allowed to legislate on. Because right now, Congress is trying to pass this emergency legislation to get desperately needed funding to the American people. But it's a $900 billion relief bill. And, if we just do some simple arithmetic, $900 billion divided evenly between the 330 million citizens of the United States of America comes out to around $2,700. But they're deciding to send us $600 checks while they're trying to offshore a significant amount, billions and billions of these dollars to countries like Sudan, Guatemala, all over the world. Yeah. Why does that make any sense? We need to have an America First agenda where we serve the people of the United States before we start taking care of the rest of the world.
I couldn't agree more with that. I want to ask you, you're at this turning point thing over the weekend. A lot of young Republicans gather there. It's a pretty cool thing. When you talk to a lot of young people that aren't necessarily on the right, they talk about the idea of getting rid of the Electoral College. Obviously, Democrats love this idea because they'd probably never lose another presidential election. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, in this country, it's an incredible country from coast to shining coast. I mean, we've got incredible metropolitan areas like Miami and New York. We have got the Rust Belt in the north. We have, what we call flyover states that are heavy in agriculture in Minnesota and all across the Midwest. But then you have areas that are heavy in tourism, like my home in Western North Carolina, the beautiful Appalachian Mountains. Yeah. And so you're going to tell me that you want every single one of those people to be represented by what I think it's 17 counties that you would need to be able to win a presidential election? That's ridiculous. We created the Electoral College so that we would never have a tyranny of the majority. And that is exactly what the Democrats want. They are hungry for power, and God help us if they ever get it.
Yeah. Just don't have a lot of time. Real quick, want to ask you, you want to talk about term limits in Congress. You want to do that. That's something you're up for.
That is my number one goal in Congress. I think actually once I get term limits on Congress, I will retire from public life and I'll go back to raising my family. But I don't understand why there are people like Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, although I do like Mitch McConnell, who have been in Congress or in Washington for longer than I've been alive. They're disconnected from reality. They're multimillionaires who have armored cars, bodyguards. They stand behind velvet ropes, and they never get out with the normal Americans. So I think we need term limits. I think we need congressmen to start living in their districts rather than Washington, D.C., so that we can represent the will of the people who we are elected to do.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever designed to be a career, politics. I think you were supposed to go out in the private sector, figure something out, and then go do politics when you wanted to give something back. Madison Cawthorn, thank you so much for joining us. Again, congratulations on the election. Good to see you.
It's an honor, brother. Thank you.
All right. And welcome to Rob Schmitt tonight. Just to give you some scale, $1 billion used to be a lot of money, but now we're throwing around trillions. And 1 billion seconds ago, it was 1988. But think about this, 1 trillion seconds ago was 32,000 years. Let all that percolate in your mind as I tell you the story of how we got to almost $1 trillion deal today. Months ago in the summer and the fall, Democrats wanted to spend $2.2 trillion on a second COVID package. The negotiations led, of course, by Nancy Pelosi. The Dems did not want to move an inch. And even at CNN, they knew exactly what Pelosi was up to. Take a look.
Let me read a line from the letter you wrote. The president only wants his name on a check to go out before Election Day and for the market to go up. Is that what this is all about? Not allow the president to take credit if there's a deal that will help millions of Americans right now?
He's not that important. But let me say this. With all due respect, and you know we've known each other a long time, you really don't know what you're talking about.
I kind of did. Pelosi had no intention of agreeing to anything, even a dime, under that $2.2 trillion. For them, this was all politics. They didn't really care what people needed. They cared about winning, and they desperately needed to win against President Trump. Meanwhile, for the last 6 months, Republicans have been pushing for the exact bill that is being passed tonight. Here's Mitch McConnell today.
As far back as July and all autumn, Republicans have consistently supported a targeted package right in the ballpark of this total amount with exactly the same kinds of policies in the mix. So why did it take all this time? We know why. We've heard Democrats say openly they were not willing to deal all summer and fall, but are willing now because they have a president-elect of their own political party.
So Democrats had this bill. They had it offered months ago. And over the weeks, Republicans during the summer would come up a lot. The White House would offer $1.6 trillion, then come up even further to $1.8 trillion. Republicans gave way more than they wanted, hoping to get some kind of deal done for the people, nearly doubling their offer. Democrats wouldn't move an inch. They said no way. Pelosi would rather let Americans suffer than pass a bill that she couldn't take 100% of the credit for. But now that it's no longer politically useful to her, well, fine. Here, take your money, peasants. The Queen has now moved on to her next political game. So what exactly is in this $900 billion, 5,500-page bill? Well, it's got more unemployment benefits, $300 a week extra through March. Also, $600 stimulus checks for those making under $75K. But why couldn't Democrats have accepted this same bill all those months ago? Well, here's Nancy Pelosi today trying to save face.
We didn't do it. We couldn't pass legislation until now because the administration simply did not believe in testing, tracing, treatment, wearing masks, sanitation, separation, and the rest. Scientific approach.
That make any sense to you? Not to me. Pelosi made almost no sense explaining why it took several months to pass a bill Republicans were offering in the early summer. The truth is the election has now passed. The Democrats, along with the media and big tech, all worked very hard together to ensure victory for Joe Biden. And simply put, Pelosi doesn't care about this anymore. She can now endorse whatever is in this bill. But what exactly is in the bill, aside from what I just mentioned? Well, how about $700 million in economic support for Sudan? Because, of course, Sudan should be in an emergency COVID relief bill, right? $505 million to make Central American countries nicer. Now think about it. That $500 million could have been used for $10,000 payments to 50,000 different small business owners in this country who are losing everything right now. But nah. And $50 million to women's leadership programs in foreign countries. $50 million. There are hundreds of pages like this in this 5,000-page bill. If you read the whole thing, it would make you sick. But you're not going to. They're counting on that. And neither did the people voting this into law tonight. The U.S. propping up the rest of the world is alive as ever tonight.
A guided submarine from the United States is entering the Persian Gulf today in the latest show of force to Iran. The USS Georgia is loaded up with 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. This comes a day after military officials say Iran-backed militia and Iran-backed militia fired 8 rockets at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo reporting the rocket didn't injure anyone at the embassy, but the blast did damage residential structures in the surrounding green zone. But this latest show of force by the U.S. military is to send Iran a strong message. The aircraft carrier Nimitz is still nearby at a station just outside the Persian Gulf in the Arabian Sea. Joining me now to discuss the growing threat from Iran is the former Chief of Staff for the National Security Council, former CIA analyst and CEO of the Center for Security Policy. Fred Fleitz is with us. Fred, great to have you back on the show.
Good to be here.
So, they really aiming at the United States Embassy? You got to be nuts. But then again, I know the leaders of Iran are nuts, Fred.
Unfortunately, this happens from time to time. It sort of slipped off in the spring because President Trump promised overwhelming retaliation. What the Iranians are doing now through their Shiite militias in Iraq, they're thinking that this violence will force President Trump to close our embassy in Baghdad and withdraw all troops. The president is substantially reducing U.S. troops in Iraq, but he's leaving some behind because we don't want to give the country to Iran. We don't want to close our embassy. Prime Minister Kadhimi is doing good work trying to resist Iran and the radical Islamists in the country and their Shiite militias. And Iran basically thinks it can push President Trump around right now and force his hand. They're not going to succeed.
Now, to me, Fred, that seems like an idiotic move on Iran's part. The president's not going to budge here. Now, if they took the assessment that, okay, in a month or two, if Joe Biden makes it to the White House, that's a guy they probably could push around and might scare him out of Baghdad.
Well, I don't think Joe Biden's going to make any decisive decisions. I mean, the president could decide to close the embassy and pull all troops out of Iraq because Donald Trump is a decisive president. I don't think Joe Biden is capable of a decisive decision. I think he's simply going to keep our presence in Iraq. Maybe he's going to send more troops in, but I don't see Biden withdrawing.
All right. So then Iran, this is their last-ditch effort. They do know that once Biden does get in, I've got to believe the nuclear deal all comes back together for them, just like it did under Obama. Do you think?
Yeah, I'm afraid that's probably the case. The Biden team is saying that, well, we'll rejoin the deal when Iran's in full compliance. Now they're saying, well, we'll rejoin the deal thinking Iran can comply down the road. But Iran will not rejoin the deal until we drop the billions of dollars in sanctions placed on Iran by President Trump. And if the U.S. does that, it's going to be a huge windfall Iran will spend on terrorism, its missile and nuclear programs, meddling in the region. We saw this happen in 2016 after the nuclear deal was fully implemented. My hope is that Biden is going to rethink that because Iran is so much more dangerous now than when he was vice president. But I'm very worried about what Biden's going to do.
Yeah, it will be an absolute disaster if we get to that point. Fred Fleitz, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. That region often gets forgotten about as we deal with so much going on in the United States, but it's important we talk about it because it's our national security that certainly is at risk. Fred Fleitz,